prompted here. All right, good morning. Thank you all for joining us. We are going to get started here with our presentation, which is chicken coop designs. And I'm going to start by sharing the design that we use here at home. Let me know here in a couple seconds if you are seeing the slideshow presentation. Are you seeing presenter view? Yes, okay, great. So first things first, we're going to go through some do's and don'ts of chicken coop construction. A reminder, if you joined us late, we have this program the third Friday of the month, every month, but it's the fourth Friday this month, so switch it up on you. For a little introduction of myself and how I pertain to today's topic, my name is Christine Gelly, and I do have some poultry experience. In the past, I have raised market broilers, market turkeys, and currently raise laying hens. And when I say raise, we do not have a brooder box. We don't incubate eggs. We buy chicks. And I'll talk more about why we choose to buy chicks rather than raise chicks as we go along. My favorite chicken types are those that are dual purpose breeds. I like having the option of keeping them as layers or turning them into meat birds, depending on the preference. And sometimes, even if you buy sexed chicks, you may wind up with a rooster here and there. And I don't want to keep roosters. So if I choose a dual purpose breed, hopefully I can get a nicely fattened bird that's worth eating. But my favorite breeds that I've raised so far are black Australorps. They are a black chicken with shiny green metallic features on their feathers. Very nice looking bird, large sized, nice large brown eggs. They're my favorite in our flock. Buff Orpingtons are a close second. They are extremely friendly and social. Again, a very nice looking bird, consistent egg layers, dual purpose. And then golden laced Wyandottes are another of my favorite, just because they're so pretty. But they do fit well in the conditions of our flock. I'm always looking for dual purpose birds that are similarly sized and should get along socially and should have about the same size eggs so that they all fit in the same size carton. A little bit about our flock currently. My daughter, Bethany, these are her chickens that we raise. As soon as we moved to our new house, she was determined that we were going to get chickens. And we were okay with that, but of course we just moved here. We didn't have anything set up yet, but spring was coming and we couldn't say no, so we got chicks. We started with 12 sexed chicks. We got pullets, so they should all be hens, right? And they were. We have one who seems to act like a rooster, but doesn't have the correct anatomy to be a rooster, so we just assume she's a bully. But we did succeed in getting 12 hens. All of them lived through the first year. At our max population, we've had 32 laying hens at one time. That significantly was reduced over the past 12 months due to predation. And I will talk some about that as we go along. We are currently maintaining 20 laying hens, which seems to fit fairly well in our chicken coop that we've designed. It's a little bit tight though, and we'll talk more. On average, we produce 4 to 6 dozen eggs per week. And due to the breeds that we have, they are multicolored, ranging from light brown to dark brown to vibrant green. I would love to get some Americanas and throw some blue eggs in there, but those birds are very expensive. And knowing we have predator issues, I don't really want to lose a $20 or $30 bird to a raccoon. So we've not gone that route yet. And the way we market our eggs is by word of mouth. We sell them from our home. We don't have an egg license, so to be compliant with state regulations, there are exemptions for home flocks and selling eggs. But once those eggs leave your farm, you become responsible for maintaining safe conditions of those eggs when they pass to the consumer. So if the consumer comes to your farm and takes them from there, the responsibility is on them to maintain egg safety. So we choose to go with marketing word of mouth straight from our house. Let's talk some about our coop. This is probably why you're here today. So this is a picture of our coop the day that the chickens were turned in. It was homemade by my husband, Keegan. He looked a lot at prefabricated designs for chicken coops, those that you could buy or build as kits. And there were a lot of things about those kits that he really didn't like. And he decided he wanted to make something better. And for the record, I didn't want this chicken coop. I wanted a chicken tractor. I wanted to pull these birds around the yard. You know, I'm very into grazing. I wanted to embrace that pastured poultry idea, and I didn't think that free range birds were pastured poultry. I think it's a little lazy. And now that's what we do. Okay. And if you choose to do that, I'm not calling you lazy. I'm saying I wanted management intensive pastured birds. Every day I wanted to move that tractor around. He was not about that. He wanted a chicken coop. He wanted to let the birds out in the daytime. His big draw to having free range birds was to eat ticks. And that is true that poultry will help reduce populations of ticks. What we found is it's not effective enough. We still get lots of ticks on us, on our dogs, on our cats, and we treat all the animals for it. But you know, if they ever come out with a vaccine that works for people for Lyme disease, I'm going to be up there first in line. But that was the motivation for having free range birds, was insect control. And you could have done that with a chicken tractor, but Keegan really liked this idea of the coop. So that's where we went with it. And the coop that he designed is up here in the top. I hope you can you see my mouse? I'll put it over here. Do you see my mouse? Give me a nod. Okay. This part of the coop, the elevated part, which would actually be the coop, and then the rest I'll refer to as the run. The coop here is 4 feet wide, 6 feet long. So that gives us how many square feet? 24, right? I can't see the chart, and I'm also not a mathematician. So if I get it wrong, you just correct me. It's fine. We initially designed this coop to hold 12 large laying hens. It is appropriately sized, if you do the math, for this number of birds in a free range system. It's not appropriately sized for 20, which we have, and it wasn't appropriately sized for 32, which we had at the maximum. So we definitely found that we would want to make some improvements in the future if we had a larger flock for the long term. And also, this would not be the ideal design for market birds. Market birds and layers are going to have different housing requirements or considerations because their lifespans are different. And so the space required per bird is different, and some of the inside features are different. The materials used on this coop are treated pine. Um, the materials that you see right now, this is untreated lumber, but we did go back and stain it to try to help resist some weathering, and also just to make it look a little prettier because it did fade pretty rapidly. We maintain it with a dirt floor. This, of course, was the first day that the hens were in, so there's a nice grass cover there. That's not there anymore. Definitely not. It is dirt floor, and there's benefits to having a dirt floor, and there's some disadvantages. For the most part, this location is pretty well drained, but we do still get some puddles in the coop. And that may have been reduced if we had gone with the sand floor, which my colleague Tim McDermott recommends is one of the best flooring materials for a chicken coop because it's so well drained. But you do have to haul that sand in from somewhere, and it's not cheap. But you could think of it as a litter box, basically, for chickens. We have space inside the coop for 8 nesting boxes. However, we don't actually have boxes in there. We do have a nesting space, but they're not individualized boxes. That was something that we planned to do that we just didn't actually do because they seem to lay very well in there. And we didn't see the need to have the individual nests. There are roosts available for the hens up in the rafters. You can't see them here, but there are boards that go across. They're about 12 to 15 inches apart, so the birds can roost up inside the coop at night. And then the trays here on the side, if you can see these 2 silver handles, these are removable trays. So inside the coop, we line the bedding material is shavings, pine shavings. We like the medium grained, fine textured Okay, let me say that again. Medium textured. Fine is a little too fine, too dusty. Large doesn't quite provide enough absorption. So we go with the medium size shavings. The others will do in a pinch. That's our preference. And then we line the nesting boxes and we line the interior floor of the coop. And then when we need to change out the bedding, we scoop the bedding out of the nesting boxes onto the floor, and then we pull these trays out. The trays themselves are lined on the bottom with some metal sheets that have then been bolted to the bottom of the trays. And that worked really well for about a year and a half. And then with the weight of the birds constantly bouncing on top of it, and then us pulling the drawers in and out of the coop, it did start to wear on the, the edges. So we have had to do some repairs that metal sheeting, and it is very sharp. So going back on that idea, it may have been a better choice to choose a thicker metal sheet, but we do really like that. It's easy to clean and it slides pretty easily for getting the trays in and out. And we don't have any type of a drawer system on that. It's just wood on wood when it slides. Our coop, as you see in the picture right now, does not have chicken wire on the top or fully around the outside. So we have, since this time, we added additional chicken wire on the sides to make the sides completely enclosed because our birds are light enough that they can fly out. And of course, predators could get in. So at this point, our birds were too big to keep in the smaller space we had them. We needed to put them in the coop. And then we went back and we added those. So now the chicken run and the coop is completely enclosed in chicken wire. And then we let the birds out in the daytime. We do have a drop gate now on the chicken coop right at the doorway. So we can close that gate in the evening to, one, it's going to trap the heat in the coop at night, and it's going to keep predators from going in that hole. We haven't really seen predators make their way in through the door. They've climbed up the side and ripped the chicken wire off the top vent and crawled in, but they didn't really go through this door. So we added the door mainly for heat, but also for additional predator protection. And then we have electricity available in the coop. One of the main reasons we chose this location for the coop was because there was electricity already there. The previous homeowners had a small pond, like a landscape feature in the yard, and had electricity there for the pond pump. Well, we weren't doing that. We wanted a chicken coop, so we used that electricity for the coop. And it's actually inside the coop. So that means we can run all of our electric cords inside the coop rather than outside if we choose. Now that I've rambled on enough about our coop, let me tell you what all coops must have, regardless of what style you choose to do or size. You have to be able to provide the birds or do these 12 maintenance activities. Otherwise, you're going to struggle and have problems. You will have problems or your birds will have problems. Number one is you have to be able to clean the space and make it easy to clean, because if it's hard to clean, you won't do it frequently enough. And so the easier you can make it, the better. And when I say ability to be cleaned, that doesn't just mean it also means that you could sanitize the surfaces if needed. There are some nasty diseases that can get into poultry flocks. Usually they're brought in from the initial source where you've purchased birds, rather than the really bad ones. There's some environmental diseases that we do worry about, but the worst ones that may kill a whole flock usually come from the source. And so it's good to have that in mind, that if you need to sanitize, you could. The site needs to be well drained, because if you've spent any time around poultry, you know that their excrement is very potent. So we want to be able to drain excess moisture away. That's going to help with smell. It's going to help with flies. And it's going to provide better conditions for your birds so that they have dry spaces to inhabit. The coop has to provide protection from both the wind and the sun. So it looks kind of funny when you go across the chart. You have to have plenty of light, but you also have to have protection from the sun. So it's good to have spaces that the hens could access both. The space has to be well ventilated. I think this is one of the places where a lot of people forget that cross ventilation is important. If you're going to actually vent the space, the air needs to flow from one side of the coop to the other. So just one window won't do it. You have to have airspace on both sides of the coop so the air can move through. But at the same time, we want the coop to be draft free. So how do you do that? At least part of it has to have solid walls so that they can find shelter from the wind or drafts. But part of it has to be open to maintain ventilation. So in our coop, we have ventilation up at the top under the roof, and then we have also ventilation here where the drawers are. And that seems to work pretty well. Um, Remember that the space the birds are inhabiting is not the space that you're inhabiting. So where your face is not where the bird's face is. So it's often hard to really grasp what the conditions are like. So try to get onto their level if you're wondering, is the ventilation adequate in this space? You want to maintain a uniform temperature within the space as much as possible. That's going to help the birds space out naturally so that they don't crowd each other. If the birds are too cold, they may crowd each other. They could injure each other. If they're too warm, they're going to be spacing out to the edges. They'll be drastically uncomfortable. So if you can't maintain a uniform temperature, at least allow them the opportunity to leave the coop if it is too hot in there. And if it's too cold, then you need to provide some sort of supplemental heat in there. For most Ohio winters, I think heat supplementation is not totally necessary. It's necessary sometimes, but I'm not saying you have to have an insulated chicken coop that's 55 degrees, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We're just trying to protect them from the extremes. And then within your coop, you also need to have adequate roosting space. This is required for laying hens, but not for broilers. Let me try to open the chat box here in case there's any chat. I'm going to ask you a question here. Um, why do you think broilers don't need roosting space? Anybody out there? Anybody that's grown market birds before? I'm going to come back to that in a moment, but if you have an idea, put it in the chat. Within the coop, we also want to make sure the nesting space is attractive so the birds actually go there to lay their eggs rather than laying them all over the lawn or underneath the coop or out in the run, which they will do. But if the nest is attractive, they're more likely to go there. And when I say attractive, it should be clean, it should be soft, it should be free of drafts. Think about a nice cozy place to take a nap. That's what you want your nesting space to be like. Plenty of light. Light is going to help fend off microbes that thrive in moist, wet conditions, and it's also required for these birds to complete their life cycles. Like many animals, they are seasonal, and the changing of light through the seasons signals what their bodies should do. So in order to get laying hens to lay all year round, we will need to supply some supplemental light so that they don't go completely out of sync in the winter. And we had that happen this year. We didn't really have any issues with it last year, but we did this year. So I wound up providing supplemental light, and we're back to pretty much normal egg production now. And then however you choose to provide your feed and water, make sure that it's done in a sanitary method. Birds have a tendency to poop in their food and water. Even if you keep it pretty well covered, they still find a way to contaminate their own feedstuffs. So making sure that your feeders and waterers are easy to clean is very important, that you do that frequently. And then try as much as you can to make it difficult for them to roost above the feeders or waterers or to climb on top of them. Moving on, let's talk about how much space is actually necessary. Well, it depends on the size of your bird and if you're going to keep them in open housing spaces or confined spaces. There are some birds that prefer to be in confined spaces, either because management is better for them that way, or because they're too small to really thrive out in an open environment. Bantams are usually recommended to be in confined systems rather than free range systems. And that's often because they're magnets for predators. So either way that you choose to go, most people, I think, with backyard flocks go with the open housing situation. And when you select your chickens, check to see what category are they in. Are they heavy birds, light birds, or are they bantams? We have heavy birds. So when we look at the space requirement per bird, when they are young, they need 2 square feet per bird in an open housing system. When they're mature, they need 4 square feet per bird. And of course, if the birds are smaller, they need slightly less space. But even with bantams at maturity, they need 2 square feet in an open house system to maintain good health and social standing. And then in confined house situations, our space requirement per bird goes up because they're inhabiting that space all the time and they don't get a break from each other. So if we look at our large birds in an immature stage, we're looking at 2.5 square feet per bird. But by the time they get to maturity, we're looking at 10 square feet per bird. I'm going to keep the slide up for a little bit in case any of you are taking notes and address that roosting question. So we do not provide roosts for broilers because our broiler birds are designed to gain weight extremely quickly. So within 6 to 8 weeks, you have a ready to eat bird, but that bird is still actively growing. And when the bird is under that much stress from body weight, it is more difficult for them to fly. Um, and if they're trying to roost, they could unintentionally injure themselves. They may be too heavy for the roost environment. We're dealing with 2 different life purposes when we have broilers and layers. So broilers, we want them to sleep on the ground rather than in a roost. And that's just due to body mass. I see Amanda says, when figuring out your square footage for open housing, do you include your outside run too? Yes. And if I'm very confident that yes, officially, you would include your run. And when we look at the space for the nesting boxes, you don't need a nesting box per bird. It's usually about like a quarter to a third the number of nesting boxes to the number of birds you have because they will share nesting boxes. And I have a couple resources here too that we can address that more specifically for different types of birds if we want to. Here are some personal tips that I'd like to share with you based on our experience with our chicken coop. You want to make sure that the coop is comfortable both for the birds and for you, because you as the manager are going to be spending a lot of time in and around the coop as well. So my husband is 6 foot tall. I am 4'11 and a half. So the space that's comfortable for me is much different than the space that's comfortable for him. And he did build the chicken coop so that it would be comfortable for Bethany and I to work in, not for himself. So when you look at the post length here, um, these are 6 foot posts, but there's really only about 5 feet of room in that chicken run. So there's enough room for me to get in, and I can actually walk in the chicken run without bonking my head, but he can't. He has to crouch the whole time. And that's going to be uncomfortable if he was maintaining that site for an extended period of time. And then also looking at the coop, it's backwards for me over here. I can pull those trays out. I can stand inside. I could scrub the thing if I needed to. If there's a sick bird in there I couldn't get out, I can pull the trays out. I can stand in there and work in there very comfortably with the space that's provided. But if you are significantly taller than me, you would want to have more space so that you're not bonking your head on the roof. Keep that in mind. Make enough space for you as well. And then make everything as easy as possible. Access to eggs, access to the food and water, access to the birds, because the easier it is, the more likely you are to do the tasks in a timely manner. Anybody want to put in the chat, how many times a day should you check for eggs? We check once a day, usually, but that's not the recommended number. Amanda says we check twice. Yes, twice is what's recommended because the birds are typically going to lay their eggs in the daytime. But some may lay in the morning and some may lay later in the afternoon. The cycle of time for a hen to lay an egg is a period of about 25 hours. Some birds are slightly different. But if you think about that, the cycle is going to be off 1 hour every day. So they're not going to lay at 8 a.m. every day. If they lay at 8 a.m., the next day they would probably lay at 9, and then the next day at 10. And then by the time they get to night, they're not going to lay eggs at night. They'll wait until morning to lay. So it's ideal to check in the morning and then check again in the evening or afternoon. And that is going to provide more sanitary conditions for the eggs. The quicker you can collect the eggs, the less likely they are to get poop on them, to be stolen by a predator, or to be the victim of egg eating. Sometimes you can get aggressive birds that will eat the eggs inside the coop, and you certainly don't want to be in that situation. So removing eggs promptly is important. And Bethany is joining me right now. I'm going to mute for just 1 second. If you have additional questions, go ahead and put them in the chat at this time, and we'll continue in just one moment. Bethany sees that Grandma is on the video. She would like to say hello. So let's take a pause here. She is still in her
Hi,
pajamas.
Bethany.
So you can say
Hi.
hello.
Good to see you this morning, honey.
To continue on with some tips, Bethany may have additional tips for you. Perfection is unattainable, okay? I think many of us are striving for perfection in all the things that we do, but sometimes we need to accept that perfection is not possible. So you're always going to find ways that you could improve the system, and there's nothing stopping you from doing that. If you find that something doesn't work, just take that as a learning experience to move forward. And then in all of your day-to-day activities, try to be as sanitary as possible. Remember that there are bacteria that can make people sick that could be present on eggs, that are present on chickens, in the chicken's environment. So while at the same time, we found that it's really beneficial to have our child interact with the birds and collect eggs, we don't want the transfer of bacteria to our sensitive surfaces. So, we have rules about you're not supposed to wear your shoes in the house, you take them off at the front door. When it comes to egg washing, there is specific criteria on if you're going to wash eggs, how, and if you're not going to, what are the things to check off the list when you inspect your eggs on whether you're going to keep them or not. Um, the safest way to store eggs is actually not to wash them, but that if they have soils on them, then you can't store them with those soils on them. So it's a management decision on your part which way you want to go with that. But remember, wash your hands after handling the birds. Don't kiss chickens. Wash your hands after you break eggs into the bowl. Keep those tools separate when you're working with raw eggs versus cooked eggs. One of my big tips for you is take predation seriously. It doesn't matter if you live in the city or the country, predators are out there. They could be rats, they could be weasels, they could be your neighbor's dog or your own dog, or they could be a fox or bobcat, a hawk. If you've had a predator snatch a chicken from your coop, put what the predator was in the chat. Let's see what they were. One of the ones that was surprising to us recently this summer, we had thought it was a raccoon initially, and we couldn't figure out how the thing got in. Keegan went out to leave for work and saw this bird laying in the chicken run. And that's never good, right? In the morning, they shouldn't be in there. They should be in the coop still. Uh, and it was missing its head. All that was left was a wing and some feet. And the predator was a possum. We were not expecting the possum to do that much damage, but it was. And the possum, as I'd mentioned before, had crawled up the outside of the coop, ripped the chicken wire off of the side, and slipped in and down. And then after eating a whole chicken, it was too full to make its way back out. So the possum was actually in the coop with the other chickens, too full to eat another one, but unable to exit. So there's a wide variety of predators that are out there. And if you have an issue with a neighbor's pet being your predator, it can get to be a sticky situation real fast, because nobody wants to believe that good old Butch the dog would kill your chickens. And it is a sad reality. Many pets are, they have genetic instincts to hunt birds, and they will do it for sport. So once you have an issue with that, it's something that you do need to address pretty quickly, and as politely as possible, neighbor to neighbor, or even within your family, as we have had to do before. We have had our dogs kill chickens um, while they're playing, and playing for the dogs, not the same as playing for the chickens. So we've had multiple birds that have perished due to our own dogs. And then if you're going to market your products, if you're making enough to share with others, make sure that the way you're marketing them is legal. There are rules for how you market these products in the state of Ohio and beyond. There are exemptions, though, for small flocks. As I mentioned before, there's exemptions based on the number of birds that you process, the number of eggs that you sell, the conditions in which you sell them. But if you are planning to take these items, whether it's meat or it's eggs, to a farmer's market, to a grocery store, you have to have a license to sell them at a retail establishment. And again, that has to do with the safety and handling of those products. The processing of the birds also pertains to that. If you're going to sell the birds retail, they need to be processed by an inspected location, not processed at home. But there is a number that you can process at home, and I believe it's under 1,000 per year that you can do without having a license to do so, as long as they're sold directly from your farm. So we have a fact sheet specifically available about the legality of selling eggs and meat in the state of Ohio. If you're interested in that, I can certainly forward that to you. And I have everybody's email from the program today, so you could just put in the chat that you would like more resources on a specific topic, and I can get those to you. And before I wrap up this part of the presentation, I did want to share some information about our OSU Livestock Teams. We have a wide variety of teams within the university addressing different types of livestock. One of them is poultry, but if you're here with another species of animal too, we have the beef team, the sheep team, along with the poultry team. This is a list of websites where you can find the team information. We also have a dairy team and a swine team too. If you have additional questions, comments for me after the program, you can contact me by these methods, either by phone or by email. And we also have a series of videos that is specifically related to pastures and grazing. We do have a video on there about pastured poultry and pastured swine. If you go to this link or use this QR code, it will take you to the whole collection of forage focused videos, and you can scroll through that playlist to find the one on pastured poultry and swine. I see a comment in the chat. I'm interested in additional info on legality of egg sales. Excellent. I'm going to send you a link in the chat here very soon. At this point, I will stop the share screen and allow for some open conversation here. We're at about 9:12 a.m., so that gives us a little under 20 minutes to be within the hour to share with each other. Something that I didn't show in my presentation is the design of mobile units for birds, chicken tractors or chicken coops on a trailer. I have lots of pictures of those that I can share with you if you are interested. for those of you looking more at that pastured or mobile um, unit, you can get very creative with building chicken coops or nest boxes on trailers, repurposed manure spreaders. Anything that has wheels can pretty much be made into a mobile chicken coop. And let creativity guide you, but also make sure whatever your design is, that you're providing those 12 key elements of your chicken coop design. Whatever size, whatever shape, whatever purpose, it's got to have those 12 things. I'm seeing some requests for resources in the comments, and I will definitely forward you that information you're requesting. I'm going to go ahead here. I think I have the links available to put in the chat for some of the resources I've gathered. Does anybody have any questions, comments, would like to share about their own chicken coops?
What if you are only going to have chickens for your 4-H project and they are broilers? So it's a short-term project, but it's actually a crash course. Got any ideas? Because we didn't do it very well.
So that's my mom, Joyce Ritchie, talking. And we did pretty well, Mom. I think we did good. But in that situation, you only have the birds for a short period of time. If you're talking about market broilers for fair, usually you have them for 6 to 8 weeks. So in that situation, you need to be prepared to have a brooder location for the baby chicks when they come, to keep them warm, dry, safe, and then be able to move them outside. And with market birds, they are bred to mature extremely quickly. So you're going to see the growth development of those birds um, happen dramatically faster than with laying birds. So you've got to be ready to go, like have your chicken coop set up and your brooder box set up at the same time, because before you know it, you're going to need to move them outside. The space requirement for those market birds, like I said, is a bit less than for layers. One, because they're younger, their body size is still smaller, and two, because they're not moving around as much. When we're growing market birds, one of our big things we want to do is increase weight gain. You're looking to fatten that bird as quickly as possible and get it into somebody's refrigerator or freezer. So you still have to provide those 12 things on the list, sanitary feed and water, protection from predators, protection from wind, rain. So basically, you've got to design some type of a space that you can keep predators out of, keep the chickens in, that has dry bedding and the ability to offer clean food and water. So in the situation that Joyce is referring to, we raised market broilers in a dog kennel. And that dog kennel was probably 5 by 10, I want to say, maybe 5 by 12. Not a big space, and we had about 25 market broilers in there. But if you're looking at a 5 by 10 dog kennel, how many square feet is that? That's 50 square feet, right? And that means we're providing 2 square feet per bird, which is adequate for market broiler production. And again, they're going to be moved in and out of that space pretty frequently. And if this is a 4-H project, you're going to be encouraging, I hope, your 4-H'er or your FFA student to be out in that space, monitoring them on a frequent basis. So we're going to be constantly checking that they have clean food and water and that their bedding is fresh. The smaller the space you go, I'm not saying you can't successfully raise birds in a smaller space than what the recommendations say. You can. It's going to require more work from you as a manager. And if you get too tight, you're more likely to see issues with dirty feed and water and the pecking order, because the more aggressive birds will hog the feed, hog the water, and they can get aggressive with the other birds lower in the pecking order. And that could create issues even as far as cannibalism. So to maintain good social structure within the flock and healthy conditions, you do want to get as close to the recommended spacing requirements as you can. If you can't meet that, then you either have too small of a space or too many birds. Usually when you order chicks, you need to order them in quantities of at least 6. So I think that's why most prefabricated chicken coops are designed for 4 to 6 birds. because that's what starter flocks are typically going to look like the first time around. But buying in bulk will also get you a discount. So when you're looking at, if you're looking at a broiler flock, either for a project, for a student or for yourself, you want to make the effort worthwhile, so that at the end of the project, you have enough food to actually have some substantial meals to provide either for yourself or someone else. So when I was in FFA doing broiler projects, we took a pen of 4 to the fair. We were only showing 4 birds. How many birds did we have, Mom? I think we had about 25.
Right, 25, 24, something like that.
Yeah, and in one set, right? And so we only had those birds for
Right.
a short period of time, but that's a lot more meat to deal with. But it made the effort worthwhile. And it also gave you a safety net if your birds die, because birds die, chickens die. I think you should count like on a, I'm making this up, it's not referenced from a book, but I would count on a 10% death loss if you're buying chicks from the store. I would expect at least 1 out of 10 to die before you get them outside. That's a pretty drastic mortality rate, but that's what I shoot for. If I don't have any dead chicks, I'm happy. And if I have less than 2 dead, I'm still happy. They're fragile creatures, and they're very sensitive to heat changes. And so in transport, they aren't particularly strong, jointed. So if they get roughhoused in the process, you can have things like broken legs that they typically don't recover from, broken wings. So what I'm saying is going, I would plan on getting a couple more birds than is ideal for you in case they die. But make sure you have enough space for that number of birds in case they all live. I guess that wraps up my recommendation based on your question, Joyce.
Well, do remind them that I did have a waterproof cover, or somewhat of a cover, to protect from the top and the rain. And the dog kennel did have a man door, and because it was designed as a wire, I could hang quite a few things off of the edge. So especially the water, because they dump the water a lot.
True,
And that meant
yes.
for a grassy floor, and without monitoring, that floor could get muddy really fast. Not good for market broilers, who you want those feathers to be very white.
Yes, that is true. When you're showing the birds, they need to look pretty. And market broilers are pure white, the ones that you're going to buy for those projects. So keeping those birds sanitary and clean from the get-go is very important. I don't care what kind of feather wash you buy. It is hard to wash a chicken, and it is hard to get stains out of feathers. So trying to keep those birds dry and
One
clean.
thing might have been good for our broilers we used for the turkeys is a calf hutch.
Yes. You
Now, it
can
was hard to
repurpose
get
all
in and
kinds of
out.
different farm materials. That
It
was
was
an
hard
We
to get
adequate
in and out
question.
of the
actually, we took our calf hutch. We modified, we had a 3 calf hutch that hadn't been used for a year. So we turned that into a coop and then attached a dog kennel on the outside of it for their run. Built a man door to go into the coop, and build another drop down door for the chickens to come out of into the run. And hardly had anything in it. We do have a concrete floor inside the coop because we deal a lot with weasels where I live. I live in Washington County. So, we put shavings and stuff on top of the concrete, but we had the price of our concrete, and then I bought just a sunshade to go over top of the dog kennel to provide that shade when they were outside, and maybe had $50 in the whole thing. So quarantine
It was
project.
definitely a learning experience.
I think that if you're going to get in a project to test out one, if you even like chickens, because some people just aren't bird people, and that's okay. You don't have to be a bird person. If you're completely new to this, or you're recommending something to a friend, I would say start off with like 6 market broilers because if it is not for you, you're done with the project within 2 months, and at least you have something to eat. But if you're going to go with laying hens, it's going to take at least 20 weeks, at least 20 weeks of care before you get an egg, sometimes longer. So you're in this for 5 months or so before you even get something to eat. And then the turnaround is fairly quick. I know some people keep hens for years that lay eggs still, but do they lay eggs consistently on that 25-hour life cycle? No, they lay an egg here and there, and they tend to be the ones that kind of bully the younger ones, and they sit on the nest even though they're not laying eggs. You are losing money on those birds because they're still eating the same amount of feed and they're not giving you the same amount of eggs. So it's recommended to refresh your flock every 2 years. Like that's the maximum. About 1.5 years is what's recommended because peak egg production comes because I'm thinking weeks. That's what I'm saying, weeks. 40 weeks. I was saying months, but I meant weeks. So we're looking at a bird that's over like right about 1 is where she's at her prime. And then from there, we're going to start to see reductions in difficulties with consistent egg laying. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at which venture is best for me. If you're looking for a quick turnaround, market birds are the way to go. But if you're looking for a more drawn out process where you're really going to get to know these birds, appreciate them, and then also have a more consistent stream of product once you get to maturity, you can do that pretty well with laying hens. And again, like I stated, you can get birds that are dual purpose. If you already know what your purpose is, great, select birds based on that purpose. But if you're still trying to figure this out, I would go with a dual purpose bird. It's going to take more time to get that bird to maturity, but once you do, it's a nice bird that's marketable as meat either way. So again, going back to that, that's what I really appreciate about those birds. And then I do want to share a couple of these resources. We can continue to ask questions as we go. One of the go-to guides, I'm gonna have to turn my virtual background off, but Story's Guide to Raising Chickens. This is a well-known referenced guide. Our OSU fact sheets on backyard chickens use this as a primary guide. Story's Guide to Raising Chickens. It is 340 pages long, all chock full of chicken advice, both laying hens and market birds. There are a lot of reliable hatcheries around the state. The one that I personally like to go to, and I usually don't recommend companies because I don't want to be biased, but I have the catalog here, and I am partial because they are in my hometown. But Meyer Hatchery produces a wide variety of birds available multiple times of year, and I've always had good success with birds from them. I've heard good reviews about almost every hatchery though in the state of Ohio. So if you want to get your birds from one of those hatcheries, call them up, tell them exactly what you're looking for, ask for them to send you a catalog so you can see their entire selection. And then they'll give you guides on when they'll have specific breeds available, what the minimum or maximum ordering criteria is, and then they often sell a lot of the other materials you may need to care for your flock, including chicken coop kits, feeders, waterers, brooder boxes, incubators, etc. And then some hatcheries, if they happen to be near you, may also sell feed and bedding, and you could develop a close relationship with the hatchery. And they would certainly be the experts in your area if you have additional questions about bird care. And your veterinarian. Just because we're dealing with a small bird as our livestock doesn't mean a veterinarian isn't key. If you are raising birds for production purposes, you should have a relationship with a vet in case something goes wrong. Because remember, they're in a flock. So if you have a problem with one that's related to disease, you could very quickly have a problem with everyone. And that could be devastating to your flock. And then it's going to slow down your production time because now everything is contaminated. You have to sanitize everything. So if you have questions about flock health, the place to go is to a veterinarian. You're certainly welcome to call me and ask me questions, or use some backyard chicken blog to ask questions to people as well. Those are very popular, but I would not take that advice as the most reliable. The most reliable advice for chicken health comes from a veterinarian. And we are fortunate at Ohio State to have some poultry resources that are veterinarian cited that I'm confident will give you good advice and good information. But if you have a problem at your home farm or your home backyard, it is a local vet that needs to come out and help you address that. And a lot of them are able to give advice on the phone for you, and sometimes can send things like prescriptions digitally, but you have to have a relationship with them first. If they don't know you, they won't do that. So um, find out who in your area is a veterinarian and at least give them a call so that you're aware of each other. Do we have additional questions or resources that you are looking for that you can't find that I can help you with before we end our meeting today? I do see that there's been some requests for the information about marketing meats. I have those downloaded as PDF copies, so I can email those to you. They're not as easily accessible online because they come from ODA, but I can get those to you by email. So if you have questions about meat, bird production, just let me know in the chat box so I can send that over to you. We have really found that having chickens at home brings a lot of fulfillment to us in our day-to-day lives. I like to watch them forage, but at the same time, I can't have a mulched garden bed because chickens scratch. They love to scratch. They love to forage, and that's one of the things we love about them. But they will tear up your yard over time if you do not rotate them from one location to another. So that's one of the things we found about having our coop in a stationary location. It doesn't look as pretty in this spot as it did when this picture was taken, because the most frequented area of the yard is around this chicken coop. So I usually put some grass seed down in early spring to help fill in some of the patches. But you know what they do? They go back and they scratch it up. They eat the seeds, they eat the seedlings, they eat all the bugs in the spot. They're super great at cleaning up the area and making it a clean seed bed. But if you want seed to grow there, it can be a challenge. So if you don't like that activity, then a mobile unit is the best solution for you. If you can move their stationary coop, obviously the coop is going to stand still for them to get in it. That's what I mean. If you can move the coop to other locations, it's going to encourage their behavior to be spread out across your property. So you'll have less impacts of that natural foraging behavior on the landscape. If you're doing this in town where your neighbors judge what your lawn looks like, a mobile unit is probably the way to go, or you'll want to put it in the backyard where your neighbors don't see it constantly, because that area of the ground is going to get tore up over time. Okay, well, we are at 9:31 right now. I'm glad that you all joined us this morning for the meeting. I welcome you back to Farm Talk Breakfast again in the future. And if you have additional needs or questions that come up after the program today, feel free to reach out. Let me put my contact information up on the screen again here before we end, so that you know how to find me, just in case. We'll share screen this with you. You should be seeing that contact slide. The first number on the list, that is the main office line number. So whether you're calling to speak specifically with me or another educator in our office, that first phone number goes to our administrative assistants. And then the second number is my direct line. That one will ring directly to my desk, whether I'm in the office or in the home office. That's the number that goes straight to me or my voicemail. And then my university email address is provided as well. Okay. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you have suggestions for programs in the future, I would love to hear them. Like I said, Farm Talk Breakfast is rotationally offered once a month with a topic that takes about 45 minutes and 15 minutes of question and answer. there's a lot of flexibility on what we can provide in that time frame. And right now, one of the benefits of virtual programming is we can get speakers from all over the place to join us for this program. Whereas in person, they would have to travel. So keep that in mind if there's material you're looking for. Okay. With that, I wish you all a happy Friday, happy weekend, and we will see you next month, I hope, for Farm Talk Breakfast.